Another week, another horrific stabbing. This time the victim was Harvey Wilgoose, a 15-year-old boy killed at a school in Sheffield. Now I don't know the full story here, and I will readily admit that. However, posts have been circulating online naming the killer, and if those posts are accurate, this would be another case of a boy from an ethnic minority background killing a white boy. Now I don't know if the name that has been circulated online is the killer's real name, and it could be disinformation, but along with the name that has been posted, another more worrying piece of information has emerged. And again, at this stage it's a rumour that is yet to be confirmed. But this piece of information stated that the killer had been warned a week earlier by school authorities for bringing a knife onto the premises. And it's at this point that everything I said in my roundup of the Southport cover-up last week immediately springs back to mind. In the case of the Southport killer, Axel Ruda-Cabana, there were multiple chances for authorities to arrest and detain him, or at least monitor him and ensure that he was not free to carry out those horrific murders. Obviously you can watch the full video to find out about the details of the entire cover-up, but let's just have a quick rundown on what Ruda-Cabana had been up to in order to refresh our minds. Ruda-Cabana had been expelled from school after bringing a knife onto school premises on 10 occasions. He then returned to the school with a hockey stick and attacked a student. He was later found guilty of 3 violent criminal offences, including the possession of knives. He was also reported to the police on 4 occasions that we know about for disturbances at his home. Finally, he was stopped by police on a bus for carrying a knife, and when asked what he was doing with the knife, he stated that he wanted to stab someone, yet the police let him go. And despite all of what I have just said, and in fact much more, Axel Ruda-Cabana was free to walk the streets and free to brutally murder 3 little girls. It appears a pattern is emerging, but some might wave this away, claiming that these are just 2 unfortunate cases that bear similarities, just a horrible and sad coincidence. However, to that response I would then bring up the case of the Nottingham killer, Valdo Callocane. Callocane killed 3 in a spree killing in Nottingham in 2023. The murder case was eventually dropped and Callocane was detained under mental health legislation. But once his trial was over, some very disturbing truths emerged. I catalogued all of Callocane's known dealings with authorities in an earlier video about migrants and mental health, link in the description below. But here's a quick recap. While studying at Nottingham University, Callocane had stalked a young woman following her back to her accommodation. She was so terrified, she jumped out of a window to escape him, causing her serious injuries. Callocane later trapped his flatmate in their shared kitchen after a row over a shower. In both cases, the university pressed police not to take further action. But that wasn't the extent of Callocane's violent acts. Just 6 weeks before he went on his killing spree in Nottingham, he attacked 2 colleagues in a warehouse in Leicestershire. The incident was reported to the police, but he was never arrested. After his trial, the press revealed he had also been sectioned on 4 separate occasions, and the Daily Mail reported that the police had been given no less than 8 chances to stop him before he went on his rampage. At this point, that pattern I spoke of earlier gets harder to wave away. It seems clear that when those from ethnic minority backgrounds commit serious acts of violence or are caught with weapons, the establishment does everything it can to wave those incidents away. This is a policy that is engaged in by the police, social services, schools, universities, Prevent, and other local and national authorities. And I am sure that many people watching this could all name occasions where those from ethnic minority backgrounds were given lesser sentences or treated with greater leniency than white people when arrested for similar offences. A great example being the 2-tier justice seen in the wake of the protests that erupted after the Southport murders. Another example of this pattern of leniency is the police cover-up of the grooming gang scandal, another issue I've covered in detail. The issue of the grooming gang cover-up is often explained away by referencing the voting power of Muslim ethnic blocs, which may well play a part in influencing the establishment's response. But I think there's undoubtedly an ethnic or racial aspect to this too, which can be evidenced by reports of police being told to literally investigate other ethnic groups. Put simply, the police did not want to investigate and charge those from ethnic minority backgrounds. So could this racial aspect to policing be just a local issue, one that affects specific areas and police forces? Well, the answer to that is no. This is actually a national policy and goes right the way up to ministerial level and to the Home Office. In 2014, the then Home Secretary Theresa May used her powers to end what was known as stop and search. Powers granted to the police that allowed them to do exactly that, stop and search people. The reason Theresa May scrapped stop and search is because she claimed it was discriminatory against young black males and other ethnic minorities. She then ordered the police to bring the number of searches down. And as you can probably guess, as the searches went down, knife crime went up. But it isn't just policing. As mentioned earlier, schools and universities have covered up acts of violence carried out by ethnic minority individuals, failed to act when ethnic minorities have brought weapons into school, and even pressured the police not to charge ethnic minority students after serious assaults. But one public body that deserves further and more detailed examination is social services, because the recent case of Axel Ruda-Cabana isn't the first example of social services turning a blind eye to violent criminal behaviour. There are of course cases that involve grooming. In 2021, it was reported that a social worker attended a wedding of an underage girl when she was forced to marry her abuser. And if you were wondering, it was an Islamic wedding ceremony. But you can go back even further when it comes to cases of social services turning a blind eye to serious abuses carried out by those from ethnic minority backgrounds, with one of the most disturbing cases being that of Victoria Climby. Victoria was an 8-year-old Ivorian girl who was tortured and murdered by her great-aunt and her great-aunt's boyfriend. The abuse that girl underwent is one of the most brutal cases of abuse I have ever read about, as her adoptive parents believed she was possessed by the devil, and as a result, they brutalised her in ways most people would think unimaginable. Victoria was forced to sleep bound in barbed wire whilst laying in a black bin liner filled with her own excrement in an unheated bathroom. She was burned with cigarettes, scalded with hot water, starved, tied up for periods longer than 24 hours, beaten with bike chains, hammers, wires, shoes, belt buckles, coat hangers, wooden spoons, and with bare hands. The extent of her injuries was shocking to say the least, but when Victoria was rushed to hospital dying, she was no stranger to local authorities. In fact, she was known to 4 social services departments, 3 housing departments, 2 child protection police teams, 2 hospitals, an NSPCC centre, and several local churches. And during the inquiry into the failings that allowed her murder to take place, it emerged that race played a role in the way her case was handled. Effectively, no one wanted to be perceived as being racist, so no one flagged up what was happening to her. Every single person who saw that little girl ignored her plight in order to ensure that a black couple were not placed under the spotlight and accused of child abuse. A common thread runs throughout this entire video. Every level of the establishment, be that the government itself, social services, the police, the judiciary, educational institutions, the media, and even counter-terror schemes, are all desperate to wave away incidents carried out by ethnic minorities. Now, whether this is done by liberal-minded fools who don't want to be accused of racism, or whether this is done by government ministers and police chiefs desperately trying to ensure that ethnic minority youths aren't arrested and the crime figures look more racially balanced, is in some ways irrelevant, because the result is the same. These policies lead to ethnic minority criminals walking free, allowing them to go on to commit absolutely sickening crimes. And whilst these crimes don't always affect white people, after all, we will never know exactly how many black youths died thanks to Theresa May's colourblind policing. The fact is, some of the most heinous crimes that white people have endured over the last few decades have been at the hands of ethnic minority perpetrators and have been completely preventable. Yet were not prevented thanks to the policies and attitudes covered in this video. We don't know for sure who stabbed Harvey Wilgoose in Sheffield. So far, all we can go on is rumours circulating online. But looking at past form, those rumours, if true, would fit a well-defined and decades-old pattern. This pattern shines a light on a dangerous policy engaged in by every part of the establishment. A policy designed to minimise the reporting and detention of ethnic minority criminals, which obviously leads to dangerous individuals being given a pass and walking free, allowing them to continue offending, often with fatal consequences. So why does the establishment pursue such a policy? Well, it seems clear. This policy is designed to prevent the public from knowing the truth about ethnic minority criminality in order to prevent criticism of mass immigration and multiculturalism. And tellingly, whenever anyone does comment on this policy, the establishment's response is to simply cry racism in a desperate attempt to silence the truth. Because if one thing is for sure, it's that the establishment is far more invested in obscuring the truth than it is about ensuring the safety of school children.